I had kind of an epiphany in in the middle of Arsenic and Old Lace of like, oh my God, this is the first and only integrated activity I have ever experienced. And it was this corny, joyous thing. And what people go through, the terror and the revealing of yourself and the confidence that is developed that has nothing to do with winning is something I'm really grateful for in my life and something that I think an arts education can really bring.
This is Arts Educators Save the World, where successful artists and their mentors talk about how arts education transformed their lives. Hey, Alek. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Arts Educators Save the World, our podcast where successful artists and their mentors talk about the impact that arts education has had on both of their lives. Welcome to our season 2 finale.
Today we are talking to Bradley Whitford, who you know for many things, and we will talk about all those things during the show. But as I will mention, Bradley Whitford and I both went to Wesleyan University, and we, about 10, 15 years apart, had the same very influential theater teacher. So I've been waiting to do this since long before we had a podcast to do it. But then Arts Educators Save the World came and saved me. And I finally got to have my conversation. But Bradley, as he will explain, could not bring one of his mentors on. So we're doing something a little different this time, Erica.
Well, and to continue the connections to Bradley Whitford, one of the reasons I was so excited about this opportunity is Bradley Whitford spent his high school life in Madison, Wisconsin, and he is a product of Madison East High School, one of 5 public high schools in the Madison Metropolitan School District that has a well-storied theater program that Bradley is very fond of talking about. And for those of you who follow politics, Bradley has also been very involved in Wisconsin state politics. So I knew that he held Wisconsin and Madison and education, public education in Wisconsin and Madison close to his heart. And so we reached out to him for that reason and reached out to my friend and current Madison East High School theater teacher, Paul Milisch, who was able to join us and share in the reflections on Madison East High School's theater scene as a big part of Bradley's life.
Okay. What's next? Bradley Whitford is an Emmy Award-winning actor. He is also a writer, producer, director, and a political activist. He intersects with Arts Educators Save the World in several ways. He was born in Madison, Wisconsin, where he also went to high school, which is where our own Erica Halverson now lives and teaches. He's also a graduate of Wesleyan University, where he was an English and theater major, which is all precisely true for me as well. After Wesleyan, he attended Juilliard, where, not for nothing, I also took an American Sign Language Interpreting for the Theater intensive. And in a recent interview, he said, "I really advocate, especially in this time, for arts education." Bradley Whitford, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alek and Erica. It's great to be here. I'm at the age where many of my mentors are no longer mentoring, but I'll talk about Lin and I had the same college professor.
And he's this college professor that I had too, so we will talk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This is deep.
And I'm excited to see what's going on at Madison East High School, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure. Oh, God, yeah. No, you got to face down stage.
In order to take us into our Madison East journey, I am also so excited to introduce my friend, Paul Milisch. Paul is the producing director of theater at East High School, where he has been in that role since 2008. And he's survived a lot of different aspects of high school theater, including leading some really compelling virtual theater experiences as we all spent an entire year trying to make art online together. He's been a teaching artist all around town at youth theater companies, including the Children's Theater of Madison and Madcap. He's also himself a professional actor. I have seen him in Little Miss Sunshine, in Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, and he was in a monologue festival with the professional theater company in town, Forward Theater, the title of which was Beer is Food, which I did not see, but sounds like it was pretty great and local. And then the other thing I want to share is I happen to know one of Paul's current students very well. And so I reached out to him and I said, can you tell me something about Paul as an educator and how his work influences you? And Tegan Klutzman, high school junior at Madison East High School, texted me. He's very good at creating safe spaces and encouraging and building trust among all students. So, Paul, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. This is really exciting.
I am going to start us off. Bradley, we're going to do a little This Is Your Life journey. I know that you were born in Madison and then grew up in Pennsylvania, but then came back here and went to Madison East High School. But when were you first interested in the arts?
I grew up in a family where the arts were encouraged, where we all took music lessons. My dad was an amazing pianist. My mother was a harpist and eventually a published poet. It was aspiration in the family, I think, to do something creatively was very strong. Finding your voice was something of incredible value. I was a witness as my mother sort of found her creative voice late in her life. It's something I struggle with, having found my voice in the voices of others as an actor. I did an anti-smoking skit in sixth grade with my dog, and this is how old I am. I actually lit a cigarette during the scene and nobody got upset. By the way, I was on the tennis team at Madison East High School. I graduated in 1977. And again, this is how old I am. Between singles and doubles, the coach would hand out cigarettes and tell us to relax. So I love you, Madison. One of my earliest traumatic memories is my sister was in a play when I was like 5 years old, at Radnor High School. And I remember being terrified in the audience. And when she came out on stage, it was like I was witnessing a car wreck. Why would anyone want to put themselves in that position? And that is a feeling that has haunted me throughout my career, standing backstage about to go on in A Few Good Men for the first time, or the first job I had where I had to be naked in a Sam Shepard play, standing backstage going, how has my life conspired to put me in a situation that if you sentenced people to this, crime would go down? Like if you said you have to walk out in front of 800 people naked, it would be a great punishment. But I was drawn to it. Then I did a play in seventh grade. I played Teddy in Arsenic and Old Lace. And it's probably the best work I have ever done in my life. I remember feeling ill backstage, wondering why I was there. And then there was no greater feeling, and it's something I still have when I work, than the other side of terror. And in the middle of the first scene I was in, it became the thing that I loved to do more than anything. And I did it as much as possible. It never occurred to me, being from Madison, Wisconsin, that being an actor, I would never say out loud through the end of college. I didn't know anybody who was an actor. If you live in LA, you have a cousin whose brother, was in a movie, or it just seemed vain, but it was what I always did. I was in as many plays, and Alek, Wesleyan was a place where there was a sort of wonderful dysfunctional nature to the theater department, and along with a real opportunity to generate your own work in the 92 Theater, which is where Lin found his voice. And I was just acting as much as possible, terrified about what the future was. Almost on a whim, I applied to Juilliard, and I got in, and I remember opening it up and going, oh, I guess you're going to try to do this.
Brad, you just said that doing Arsenic and Old Lace made you love acting. Do you remember what you were feeling in that moment?
I had kind of an epiphany, like, oh my God, this is the first and only integrated activity I have ever experienced. And it was this corny, joyous thing. And what people go through, the terror and the revealing of yourself and the confidence that is developed that has nothing to do with winning is something I'm really grateful for in my life, and something that I think an arts education can really bring.
Paul, if you could say a little about your work now at East High School, and say a little about how you think about exactly what Bradley was describing, sort of what is your perspective on theater education, and how do you share that? And then maybe, Brad, you can reflect on how similar or not that is to what you experienced.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I teach theater classes during the day, and then after school, the extracurricular portion of it. A small percentage of those students are going to go on to do, anything substantial with theater. But I think what you talked about with the integrated activity is really the important thing that kind of gets missed in theater education. A lot of people at the administrative level will talk about it as, well, it's the big flashy show. We're going to go, we're going to see it, we're going to support it. And I think it's everything else besides opening weekend and the performances is what it's really all about. I'll tell a lot of people, if a 17-year-old can stage manage a cast of 40 students in a very complicated physical space, I think they're going to be okay. They're going to do okay for themselves in the future, no matter what you do. I mean, that translates to absolutely everything. So Tegan's very nice words about creating a safe space. I do a lot of that work very, very deliberately before the process starts. But one thing that I truly enjoy, and is honestly the only reason that I'm still able to do this, is that you imbibe the students with, your idea of what this community and what this collaboration looks like. You give them any knowledge that you have, you give them blocking. And then at some point in the process, you get to kind of just step back and let them basically educate themselves through the process, watching them understand something in the scene for the first time with, oh, now I understand the pace of this, why the pace of the scene needs to be brisk and move along. And, oh, that's how I'm going to really make that entrance, pop for the audience. I get to witness those kind of discoveries that are part of the collaboration in the process. It's not about me standing up there yapping. And I think that's what's really interesting and fulfilling for my work. So I guess I have a quick question for Brad, if you don't mind. Usually we'll do a wall of fame for production for moments that were memorable or moments that stood out or were just goofy. Can you remember anything from your time on the Margaret Williams Theater stage where you had one of those moments in performance or in a rehearsal that just was kind of like a light bulb moment?
Perry Juneman, who I spoke to recently, who used to teach there, had just taken over for Margaret Henderson and was a young teacher. And we were doing a production of Charlie's Aunt. And there was an understudy group, and we got to do a matinee performance for the entire school. The understudies did before the Friday, Saturday shows. And I stand behind none of my work, but it killed. And it was a huge, weird, almost disorienting thing in my life. And Perry, and this is what I feel ambivalent about, gave me one of the guys' performances, gave me a Saturday night performance. It did give me this kind of confidence that, well, your instincts are right in this area. That was my freshman year, was in retrospect, sort of being sort of shot out of a cannon. If I was coming up now, there is such pressure on children now that I did not feel this premature specialization. Like parents my age and younger, we're going to support whatever it is. I mean, whether it's the arts or academics or athletics, we're totally cool. We're going to support you. But what are you? At a very early age, my parents were supportive, but never remotely pushed it. Here's a name drop. Bruce Springsteen wrote a song for a movie I was in Philadelphia, and I've spoken with him over the years. And I had a conversation with him where we were talking about this, about raising kids. And I said to Bruce Springsteen, my close personal friend, the boss, I said, if your mom came down and said, man, you got something, do you want to take guitar lessons? And he's like, yeah, I'd be a drunk in Newark. I am so grateful. I would not have had the ownership, my identity, if it were something that, had been imposed on me. Now, I was totally supportive. And there's a part of me that worries about it because it becomes something other than what it was for me, which was a way to discover how to be a human being. It was not a winner-loser situation. It was pressing myself through literature. It was connecting with other people. It was putting myself in other people's shoes. And that's always my sort of fear about it.
I hope it's okay to go back to this moment, Brad, that you talked about that I actually thought was sort of dated. And I was shocked to hear you say that a teacher made a decision to change out an actor in a performance.
Yeah.
That would not happen today.
No.
And I guess, Paul, I'm just wondering about as an educator, your reaction to that, and not to criticize the person that made that decision, because different time, different way of thinking about how we do arts and education, but just what that makes you think of and how you're a different kind of an educator, perhaps.
Well, yeah, I think the whole idea of what is the why is kind of something that I'm hearing resonate. Like, why are we doing this? Are you doing this because, you want to be in front of a few hundred people and have a curtain call, or be able to be one of the cool kids or whatever? I think that's on the educator. Like you're the adult in the room, and you have to call out bad behavior and be the example. In every production, there'll be 5 or 6 students that approach me after auditions and say, I don't know if I'm going to get cast, but I kind of want to be here. And I mean, that's not me patting myself on the back. That's the fact that the theater community here is strong and they care about each other. The why is very clear. The people who are here to kind of, fuel an ego, they kind of stand out. And I think as a theater educator, that's kind of one of your unique niches, right? Like someone who's teaching acrylics or art metals doesn't have to worry about this in the same way about like what does this community actually look like? How are people acting off stage? What words are they using? What are they showing each other on their phones? It's trumped up in a situation when you're doing theater because it is so collaborative and honestly like not directly supervised all the time. There's times where I don't see them and I try not to get terrified. And then sometimes I find them and I said, wow, I wish I wouldn't have found them. But I think that's on the educator, and the why for the educator as well. I love this work. I think I have the best job in the world. That's why I'm doing it.
You're reminding me, Paul, that I think it really needs to be emphasized. What the arts are developing are these interpersonal skills under a peculiar kind of pressure that will be transferable to many aspects of their lives.
One of the things I talk a lot about in my book, and we talk a lot about on this podcast, is the importance of scaffolding risk-taking and how arts practices are really good for that in life, but how also it's really hard to be creative to make art unless educators provide the scaffolds for people to be able to take risks.
Everybody is 10 times more insecure when you're trying to do something creative than they will ever be willing to admit. Because until, I don't care if you've done like 160 episodes of West Wing in the last day, until the scene works, you don't know if it's ever going to work. And I think that's a good place of innocence for people in all areas of their life.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. That is so important. So, Paul, let me ask you, if you could share with us maybe one practice that you have either in your classroom teaching or in your directing that's designed for that. Like, how do you scaffold risk-taking for the young people you work with?
That's a great question. The first thing that kind of came to my mind is we start in theater one, we'll start with improv and do all that garbage. But the one thing that we'll talk about that I structure and scaffold fairly heavily is how to respond to a scene. And so for the first several weeks, we will only say the spots of a scene that worked and what was great. We won't say anything else. And then we kind of slowly roll into this idea of that was great. What are some other possible choices? And I use the language very deliberately. So they have to say this every time. I think that repetition is a part of it. So it's not like this one was wrong. It's not like the scene sucked, but it's the idea of looking at something and being able to say, this could have also been something that could have happened. There's no right or wrong, just the need to make choices. So getting them comfortable to talk in that specific way. Once you have that, then scripted scenes, pantomime, whatever we're doing, movement, sets everybody up for success and how to respond positively.
God, I love that.
Hey friends, just a quick note as we jump back in. There are going to be some mentions of verbal abuse in the next few minutes. So if that is triggering to you, skip ahead. Otherwise, back with Bradley Whitford.
So a few years ago, Erica asked me if I might want to develop this podcast about successful artists and their mentors. And did I in that moment think, well, if I do this, then maybe one day I can somehow connect with Brad Whitford and we can talk about Wesleyan? Yes. Yes, I think I did. Okay, here we are. Let's do this.
Go, baby.
So we had a teacher named Bill Francisco who died a few years ago, and he was my mentor.
By the way, there would be no Lin
Correct.
Miranda without Bill Francisco.
Correct. Yes. So he taught by example. He taught shows that to this day, 25 years later, are more memorable to me than stuff I've seen on Broadway. He taught through very, very honest feedback.
Yeah.
And in class, where for me, the lesson I think I take with me most is know your perspective on the story that you are directing and manifest that perspective in every aspect of the production on every corner of the stage, right? There's no shortcuts. You must be clear in the story you're telling.
Yes.
Now, Brad, I'd love to know what your perspective as an actor is about your work with Bill. But since I do assume that we're going to have some Wes alum listening to this, it's important to say unequivocally that he played favorites and he was verbally abusive.
Oh, yeah.
And none of that was okay. And for those of us who were the favorites, I think I live with the lifelong contradiction that for me as a director, I'm always thinking about what he said and what he did and things he taught me, always. And at the same time, knowing that he was just a terror.
Absolute terror.
Okay, good. Because you had him about 10 years probably before I did. It's good to know that he didn't change.
Yeah, it wasn't you, Alek. It wasn't you.
Okay, good. So, Bradley Whitford, tell me please about your arts educator, Bill Francisco.
Very interesting figure. Totally abusive. He was a child emotionally. It's not an excuse, but he went through some hell when he was young, was very frustrated. And I think in the world now, that kind of abuse is not tolerated as it should not be. It is not productive. And it is, to me, violent. He was very nice to me, but I never was directed by him. The greatest thing he ever said to me about acting was I was asking some question. It was something that came up in a scene. And he's, Brad, if it's working, don't fucking think about it. If you can smell that it works. And then he said, I think you can smell, when it works. He was an early voice to me saying, don't be dogmatic about acting. And it didn't just apply because he was kind of, supportive of me. He was an early voice of nobody knows anything. Acting is mysterious. I think Lin and I were beneficiaries of, oddly, from that kind of tortured soul, a kind of like, listen to the whispers in your head. Don't let anybody take that away from you. Well, he's taking it away, from people he didn't happen to respond to. He's a very tricky figure in my life. But yeah, Bill's a complicated figure to me. What was his relationship with you?
I mean, it's very similar. I'll tell you what's interesting. What he gave me, it was this extreme freedom. And I think that, a lot of what Erica's book is about is the arts practices that you don't usually think about for a math class, right? Math, here's the problem, here's the way to do the problem. And an artist comes in and says, what do you think? What does your voice say? And how do you want to approach this?
Right.
And that's very Wesleyan, certainly, I think, for all of us. The other thing, though, that I got that affects me as a director, but affects me in my life, is you have 700 choices to make. But then once you make it, you need to be incredibly serious about that choice. That is, press on it. Go deeper into that choice that you made and find a level of, surely the way he would talk to the directors, find a level of perfection as you know it in that moment.
Right.
You must find your own path. No one's going to find it for you. But that doesn't give you an excuse once you're on it to screw around.
Yeah.
Like this is as long as you're going to do this, do it. There's the seriousness you're talking about. That's the seriousness with which he wants you to take it without ever taking yourself that seriously.
Right.
It makes me think of two things. One, my own college acting teacher used to always say to us, her phrase was, commit to the gesture. Whatever gesture you're going to make, right? Then you commit, and that's the gesture that you're making. It reminds me of what both of you have said, and my husband and I use that across everything that we do as professionals, right? If you're writing an academic paper and you are writing about something that you have found in your data, you don't say, well, we think maybe we found this because you say, this is the question, this is the evidence, and this is how our evidence points to this particular conclusion. This conversation makes me think of that.
Of the commitment.
Yeah, and as a way to be serious and clear without being cruel, right? So the note to commit doesn't have to be, I don't think, as an educator or as a director, although I'm not a professional director, doesn't have to be, and that last thing sucked, or why don't you do it better, or if you would just, but rather, I see you're doing X, now do X to the power of X.
Right.
Right? Take that and do that more. It makes me think of that, and not to be too much of a cheeseball, but I'm wondering, Paul, if you have an example or examples of how you use that in your own practice. Because I think part of the risk-taking of making art, making theater, is that particularly adolescents are really nervous about committing to a gesture, right? They're very nervous about going all the way in on anything, particularly with an artistic choice. So I don't know, does anything come to mind for you about the way you work with students to do that?
I think with a young adult theater artist, everyone needs to be in on it. Like if there's one person that's kind of, well, I'm not really going to go 100%, then, that can be an issue. Everything that we've been saying is about, creating community. I mean, like that's fundamentally, that's what it is, right? We're creating a community that's safe and supportive. You can get there in different ways, but at the end of the day, like we're playing. It's a play.
Yeah.
We're creating characters. We're creating an experience, but let's play.
At the very beginning, Brad, you talked about theater as an arts as an integrated activity. And I wanted to sort of reflect on the heart, head, handness of all of it. So as an actor, you've eventually got to memorize your lines, and how memorizing gets into your body, which then allows you to do an embodied practice, which then makes its way into the way you feel and the way you care, for lack of a better word. And that's another relationality that's often missing in school-based subjects, right? We treat the heart, the head, and the hand as if they're totally different practices. Oh, need a brain break? Get up and stretch. Rather than, what does it mean to use your brain and your body at the same time for a practice? And then the other thing I wanted to say is this question of confidence, and how one of the things that I learned from being a young actor that I then took into my professional practice is the separation of the choices I was making from myself as a person. I often think about having full confidence in a choice, but that I have been able to pull that away from myself as a human being. And that's another gift that I try to think about giving to educators of all kinds, is to say, yes, of course, we want people to commit all of what they do to a particular practice. But we want them a little bit to be able to say, this is a choice that I'm making. This is not me as a person.
Brad, let me ask you another Wesleyan question that I actually think goes to that and actually pulls a lot of this together, because I love this thing that you said. It was an interview and you're talking about Lin and Tommy Kail, and you said Wesleyan encourages cross-pollination.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of what Erica's book and what Erica talks about is that the more you silo things educationally, the less obvious chance you have of just the two things meeting in the middle and finding something new together.
Yes.
And I definitely felt that everything I did at Wesleyan, I did a lot of sign language. I was an English major. I was a theater major. But all the things do cross-pollinate. And so what did you mean by that? And how did you see that?
I'm glad that it didn't. I was too ashamed to say that I wanted to be an actor early. If I hadn't gone to Wesleyan, I would not have had the repetition, the inconsequential failures, the freedom to kind of honestly kind of find like an acting voice or something I believed in or had a sense in such an ephemeral business to know when it was flowing. And I was glad I didn't have to act like I didn't know I didn't want to be an actor. I was interested in these other things that then you could bring. If Lin-Manuel Miranda had gone to composing school, it would be terrible. If he had gone to acting school, best case be playing, Dr. Sanchez on Chicago Med, which would be a real loss. That cross-pollination at Wesleyan, only a place like Wesleyan does, Lin see a doorstop, historical biography, open it up when he's on vacation with his wife and finish the first chapter and be like almost in tears thinking like, this guy's Tupac. Nobody makes those connections. My favorite Wesleyan story, there was a guy I went to Wesleyan with, didn't know him real well. We ended up working in the same restaurant in New York, Panarella's on Columbus. And we became really good friends because we're working in this restaurant together. He comes in really depressed one day because he had a conversation with his father, who was not a jerk, which made this worse, who he had graduated from Wesleyan, and his dad had called. His dad was a doctor or a lawyer or something. His dad said, "Hey, are you thinking about going to grad school?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "Well, you're a really good student. I know you don't want to be a waiter. What are you thinking about?" And he's like, "You don't want to hear this." And he's like, "No, I love you. Tell me, I'm just checking in." And he said, "Well, I love playing the drums, but I'm not really a musician. I love performing, but I don't want to be an actor. That's stupid. And I'm interested in art, but the part of it is theoretical. I'm not really a painter." And so he said to his dad, said, "So what do you want to be?" And he said, "I want to be a performance artist." And there's this silence. And I think his dad said something like, "You mean like that woman who puts nails through her hands?" And he's like, no, but yeah, performance artist. And his dad had said, well, I love you, man. I'm just checking in. So he was depressed because he could tell his dad was worried about him. He created Blue Man Group, which is a great story of integration, and I think a peculiar Wesleyan mind. But Paul, I need to come back to East and do something with you guys.
Oh, we would love to have you here. That's for sure.
I was wondering what you both think about what we ought to be doing at the high school level to set young people up for the experiences you're talking about, Brad, at a place like Wesleyan or other, whether it's higher education or not. But, if high school is the chance that we have to set young people up to be these kind of broad thinkers, what should we be doing? How do we keep this alive?
It's cultivating a safe, joyous place that people are gonna want to participate in and get the chance to experience an integrated activity that is joyous, that is about connecting with the people you're working with and connecting with the audience, because it's invaluable. And hell, failing publicly is it's funny because everyone thinks that actors have these big egos, and the real thing that an actor needs is a infinite capacity to be publicly kind of humiliated.
Paul, what are your hopes and dreams for the future? East High Theater and young people.
I think there's a real opportunity gap with theater education. There's the extracurricular, fully produced shows that we do 3 a year. There's an equity issue because not all of our 1,700 students could ever conceivably do anything after 3:39 because they are going to work or they are XYZ. So I think to not have a solution, but just a big fat problem, the problem is with the 7-period day, and how we still think about how high school works. Hasn't changed much for quite some time, where there's our Pavlovian bell, and we go into a room with an adult who's talking. We hear the same Pavlovian bell. At East, it's the sound of music. Da-da, da-da, da-da. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And then we go to the next room, and then it's over. There are 3 theater classes on the books, and only 2 of them are running this semester, and 2 periods in the afternoon. I'm interested in all of those students who don't know about it, which is probably 20% of the students that walk in through my door for auditions or for a class. They're like, wait, what is this? I can do this here? Wait, you have there's a $5 million theater on the other side of your room? What? I think, Erica, this is one of your big things, is we need to rethink the whole thing, right? The whole thing needs to be rethought, because I'm just thinking of all the students who will go through East High School through their 4 years and just never have a chance or never even know about it. The second I have a little more control over, because we can get the word out. I work, specifically with certain student groups to try to get the word out for auditions and stuff like that. But I think it needs to be available to more students than it currently is. So that's kind of my big thing. When I started here in 2008, there was one theater class that was taught through the English department where, based on my few visits, they made masks and watched movies. And then, I've built it to have a few sections of Theater 1, which is performance focused. I started a stagecraft curriculum. So we have a stagecraft class that runs ideally both semesters. So I just think creating the programming and then, supporting it, support meaning, can we actually get students into these sections? I'm thinking of the students that go 4 years, audition for absolutely everything. They do every single show and everything they possibly can, even if they're in a sport and they just come back to be a stagehand for Tech Week and the performances. I'd say only about 60% of those students have taken any of my classes because their schedule is prioritized with AP classes, pathways, and all these other initiatives. I mean, these students have done every show for 4 years, but they can't fit Theater 1 in their schedule. That's something that I'm working to kind of address. It's a big picture thing, but hey, we're theater people, right? We do big picture stuff.
I think that's a really important point. We've been sort of waxing poetic, about Wesleyan, and I forget, I read somewhere that, curiosity, let alone creativity, is the privilege of people who have resources. Mm-hmm. I was on the board at Wesleyan, and the fundamental question to me the entire time is, Are we expanding opportunity or are we preserving privilege? And the schools will certainly genuinely try to address that, but I don't know if it really gets addressed. And what Paul is saying is the most important thing. And the interesting thing is sometimes now there's well-intentioned diversity box checking, which is not genuinely understanding the value of new voices.
Well, Brad, I know you do a lot of political advocacy nationally, but in Wisconsin especially. And we have a lot of listeners who are Wisconsin-based listeners. And something I would say is that this is actually a bit of a political question. And what I mean by that is listeners might not know that there are no arts classes required for graduation in the high school curriculum. So you need 3 semesters of PE to get a Wisconsin diploma. And you can take arts classes as electives, but they're not required.
Right.
And the state of Wisconsin is 50 out of 50 in its per capita spending on the arts.
Jeez.
Which means that arts education is doubly disadvantaged by the ways in which our state laws construct what is valuable. And so, as actors in the system, we can both make change, as Paul and all of his colleagues are doing in the schools, and we can advocate to our local school boards, to our local state legislators, to think meaningfully about the role of the arts in our public system and to the role that the arts play in our local economies. And I know that we live in a place that is challenging to have those conversations, but these are very specific asks and very specific actions that those of us who care about everything that Bradley was saying, because of course, this is an equity issue, this is an access issue, it is what my colleague sociologist John Diamond calls opportunity hoarding, which is the ways in which those of us who can take advantage of all that our systems have to offer without any cost to us in those opportunities not being offered to others. So taking political action around these issues is something that I think we can all do.
Yes, I absolutely agree. It goes to something that I feel very strongly, which is that politics is the way you create your moral vision. We tend to think it's culture, which is incredibly important. But I am here to tell you that West Wing won't help you if you had a pre-existing condition. And sometimes I worry that we don't see that relentless participation in politics is the only way to have a democracy. I am so gratified by what I see in Wisconsin, which is young people who have every right to cynicism at a moment like this, doubling down their participation in the political process and in political awareness. It makes me really proud to be from there.
On Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
We did it. I interviewed Bradley Whitford. That was like decades coming. And at the end there, a great finish to, okay, what do we do? And I think that's come up a lot in our episodes. And oftentimes people have examples of what they have done to make arts education more available, make arts more available, and make it available to more people, as Bradley and you were talking about. Do you have any calls to action for us? Here we are at the end of season 2. People love this idea of more arts in school, more arts education in school. But there's all this but what? But what can we do?
What can we do? This is such a great question. And I've been thinking about this along 2 tracks. One is an advocacy track, and one is a doing track. So the first thing I would say is no matter who you are, you can have a voice in how public education proceeds in your area, whether you're a parent or a teacher or a teenager or an adult in an artist in your community. You can talk to your school board, local school board. You can talk to your state representatives, who every state legislature has an education committee. And those state legislators are the primary conduits between state government and the public. So you can talk to those folks. You can talk to your school board. You can talk to the principal of your local school about the importance of arts education for you, for your child, for your practice. You can also become part of the solution. Whatever kind of art you practice, that is an art form that more people probably need to get some experience with and would probably love to get some experience with. There are spaces where you can practice that art form with others. Public libraries often have opportunities for teaching artists or artists in residence to run programs for community members. Museums are often spaces that are welcoming to outside programming for folks with expertise who want to work with others. Schools are often hungry for volunteers or professional artists to come be part of their community and to share their art form and their expertise. So if you are a doer, and I know most of you are, why not do with others? And why not do that in these public spaces? If you are an advocate, and I know most of you are, why not advocate in the places where change happens, which is both in the political sphere and in the education sphere?
Following up on that, as the music comes in, let me ask you a question as we drift off into the interregnum between seasons 2 and 3.
Because we will be back. Oh, yes, we will be back.
Oh, we'll be back. But we've been hearing so much about people's mentors, people who have done such great things. Can you tell me 3 educators whose names you want to mention here?
Well, Anna DeVere Smith.
I mean, to see her is to learn. That's one.
What about my high school music teacher, Campbell Austin?
Can you tell us one thing about Campbell before I give you a 2?
Yes. He was, among other things, he ran a jazz choir where many of us learned both the theory and practice of music through the learning and performance of jazz standards, which was musically life-changing for me and a lot of others.
2.
And my college acting teacher, Mary Poole, who taught me many things. The life thing that she taught me that I use to this day, which I may have already mentioned on this show, is the idea of committing to a gesture. That whatever you do, you commit to it, and that's how you move forward in your life.
3 things.
And Alek, what are 3 ways that our incredible listener community can become more involved in the work that we do here at Arts Educators Save the World?
Well, I think this adds right to your list of there's the advocating and there's the doing, and then there's the rating and reviewing.
1.
You can also, of course, go to your computer and type in contact@artseducatorspodcast.com. Write to us. If you've got a mentor you'd like to just mention, and we might give them a shout out. Tell us stuff. Email us.
2.
And finally, check out our website, www.artseducatorspodcast.com, where you can learn more about Erica, more about the show, and more about arts education.
3 things!
It is 3 things right here at the end of season 2. How do you feel?
I feel great. I feel proud of the work we've done and also ready to rock and roll for season 3. Onward together.
Arts Educators Save the World is hosted by Erica Rosenfeld Halverson and produced and co-hosted by me, Alek Lev. Our executive producer is Doug Matica, and our audio producer is Justin Asher. We are also executive produced by the fantastic group at Story Pirate Studios, Lee Overtree, Benjamin Salka, and Amy Fiore. Original music is by Dan Lipton, and our artwork is by Lyra Evans. Check out our website, designed by Cole Locasio, at www.artseducatorspodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at ArtsEducators. Yes, somehow that wasn't taken yet. And on Instagram at ArtsEducatorsPodcast. Write to us with your questions and comments at contact@artseducatorspodcast.com. And wherever you're listening, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps the show. We are proud to be sponsored in part by the Wallace Foundation, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and the Gibb Faculty Fellowship. Arts Educators Save the World was created by Erica Rosenfeld Halverson and Alek Lev.